And if I can be very honest with you this morning, because you're old enough and mature enough to handle the truth, our military is suffering from these 9 years of war. General Casey, our Chief of Staff of the Army, is going to talk to you this week. And as he testified on the Hill at Congress during the congressional hearings on the status of the Army, he said two things about our Army that sort of puts it in a nutshell. He says that we are an Army that's stretched and stressed. And I can tell you that I would agree with him because we see many of our military marriages that are suffering. Now, General Bartell was just telling me that he celebrated with another couple who have both been married 30 years. And what an awesome achievement. I will celebrate, by the way, my 37th year with the same lady here in June. 25 zip codes, 2 children, 3 grandchildren, and an assortment of animals along the way. So you can survive as a couple, as a military family in the military, but I'll tell you, it is a challenge. We see many of our military families suffering because you got to sort of be home to keep the relationship alive, and the op-tempo has kept you in and out for too many rotations and too much water under the bridge and a loss of intimacy and familiarity with the husband and wife. Many of our soldiers, because of the war that they've experienced, the things that we've experienced in this time of war, they've deadened the pain with drugs and with alcohol. We've had and experienced sexual assault, and I would imagine on college campuses, if I read the news as well, not only exists there, but it has existed, and one sexual assault is too many, but it's existed within our band of brothers and sisters. And probably one of the biggest challenges that keeps me awake at night is the fact that we've had a number of suicides within our ranks. And it's not just within the Army. We see this throughout society, but last year we had 160 soldiers that took their lives. 160 soldiers. As we look at each one of these situations, we are finding that these soldiers often take their lives as a result of failure of a relationship, a Dear John or Dear Jane email, or about to experience personal shame. The military police or the CID is at the door, and they're about to be shamed for some moral decision that they made that was the wrong decision, an immoral decision. Or in many cases, and I want you to hear this one closely, a number of these soldiers who are taking their lives have isolated themselves from community. I hope that you have a battle buddy in your life, and you carry that battle buddy with you throughout your military career or your civilian career. This whole world is too tough for us to be lone rangers. You've got to have somebody that you can talk to. My youngest daughter, she's on Facebook. She has 300 friends in her social network. You probably got more than that. I mean, she even has Adam Lambert, if you ever heard that guy's name, American Idol. Anyway, but who of those 300 on your Facebook, or how many thousands that you have, is going to be there at 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning when you're thinking strange things? And so my challenge to you is to stay engaged in a community, hopefully a community of faith, but a community of supporters, somebody that you can, so to speak, let your hair down and tell them what's really going on in your life, especially if you're thinking strange things. Well, in spite of all this, I don't want you to just hear the bad news. Our soldiers are awesome. They are optimistic. They are resilient. They're hopeful. They're positive. And they're pressing on with the mission, regardless of what the Army and how many times the Army tells them to do our nation's business. They're getting it done, or getting her done, those of you from Nebraska. Anyway, we have some of the finest men and women on the earth in our ranks. They're referred to. You've been referred to, those of you who are prior service, as the national treasure of the United States, and they're to be treated with great respect and awe. We must serve them with blood, sweat, and tears. Our military represents 1% of our nation. I heard the Secretary of the Army say that. What does that mean? 1% of the men and the women in our nation carry the load for 300 million Americans. And I'm going to tell you, brothers and sisters, fellow cadets, we better take care of these soldiers. And if you want to get a phone call personally from the Chief of Chaplains, if I see or hear that somebody's not taking care of a soldier, you'll probably hear from me. And I hope they hear from you as well. And not just hear from you, but that you correct it on the spot. I hope that when you're walking the airports or you're walking out in public, you're always sort of surveying, doing a 360, but looking for soldiers or those in uniform to make sure that they're not lost, that they're not out of money, that they're not in some kind of a personal dilemma, because we need to take care of one another. As the warrior ethos goes, I will not leave a fallen comrade behind. Here's the point. Our soldiers deserve great leaders, not just good ones. Men and women who have the potential to lead our nation to greatness and our army to greatness. Great leaders like General George Cadet Marshall. I don't have to tell you much about General Marshall. Hopefully you have learned a lot about that man and even what the significance of the award that you've received. He was a tremendous leader. Some have considered him to be the greatest soldier in the 235-year history of our Army. Some have called him the greatest citizen in the 20th century. His many accomplishments are awe-inspiring. As Chief of Staff, he designed and employed the largest army in the history of our nation. As the Secretary of State, he developed the Marshall Plan for the reconstruction of Europe after World War II. And that accomplishment would earn him the Nobel Peace Prize. As the Secretary of Defense, he led flawlessly during the Korean War. And he's also president of the American Red Cross. I'll tell you something else about him. Back in October, we commemorated his 50 years of having passed from this life into the next. And talking to his friends, fellow generals, and his family members, what you see is what you got in that man. He was a deeply spiritual man. In fact, one of his relatives said, I wasn't really sure about spirituality, but I began watching him. And it was so real and important and life-changing for him that I wanted to be like him in the area of spirituality.